Let's 3D print high heels for my girlfriend. Hello and welcome to Agamid CG. I've seen a lot of 3D printed shoes and high heels, but they have me asking one question. Are they really comfortable? Let's walk through the process of creating comfortable, custom-fitted 3D printed high heels. Need a way to get the dimensions of Jenna's foot so that it fits just perfectly. First, we need to jot down some measurements, and then we scan the foot. Here I'm using Polycam, a simple 3D phone scanner. There's other ones out there, this is just the one that I use. I'm using Maya for the positioning. Let's make sure the units are in centimeters because it transfers better in the Prusa slicer. We need to position the scans so that the foot orientation matches as closely as possible. It's also a good idea to bring in the texture so that we can see where things are. I like to retopologize because it gives us a much better base mesh to work with since the scan is really wobbly. The distance tool in Maya is great for getting a quick measurement. First, you create two locators, select them, and then run this script. Then we can position the locators wherever we want to compare to the measurements we took earlier. The next thing that we want to do is model the inner part of the shoe to match the foot. Then we need to increase the resolution to retain some of the details while keeping a duplicate of this mesh around. Now that the inner mesh is complete, we can duplicate the lower inner mesh and extrude it out to make the outer mesh. Delete the faces in between and extract the meshes so that we can isolate the outer mesh. Now we can model the outer shape the way that we want. Add a heel, and when you're happy with it, combine them to bridge the faces back together. Smooth the mesh to get a higher resolution. Cool, now we have a full shoe, but we still have to get the details back into the inner part of the shoe. There's two ways that I like to do this. The first way, duplicate the shoe, and then while using Quad Draw, make your inner shoe mesh live and smooth in the details on the inner part. The second way uses a software called Wrap 3D to wrap the full shoe mesh to the inner mesh. Blend shape the altered shoe mesh into the original duplicated mesh. Adding a delta mesh can smooth it out nicely. Here are the settings that I use. Play around with it, play with the weights a little bit just to make sure you don't get any weird artifact. This can be a really tricky part of the process. You can flatten the bottom of the shoe or you can just push it down in the slicer. The only thing is with pushing it down, you might ruin the integrity of the shoe. So it's better to keep it flat so that you know how thick the bottom is going to be. Awesome, now we have a shoe that is high res and formed to the inside of the foot. Let's get it into the slicer. Since we measured in centimeters, we can just increase the scale to 1000. Sometimes I like to print a cube with the shoe just to make sure that the scale is correct. Flip the shoe so that it's standing correctly. You can pick a surface, try to get one that's going from the ball of the foot to the heel. When we were test printing the shoe, we want to make sure that it prints as quickly and efficiently as possible while still maintaining enough integrity that it can hold the weight of a person or be used just to check the fit. So in this case, I will use a draft setting. Especially for these larger prints, I like to use a 0.6mm nozzle. I'm using the generic draft settings in Prusa Slicer to start. Some of the supports that are generated are unnecessary, so you can paint them, but I like to just keep them auto-generated and keep the overhang threshold to around 20. I also tend to use organic supports. Lightning infill does the job in this case, and you probably want about 10 to 15% infill. Because I'm printing this in PLA, I bump up my speeds to about 65 for most of my print moves. And the temperature really just depends on the filament that you're using in your printer. Then I export my G-code and get printing. Everything prints out just as expected, it goes smoothly, and it fits just perfectly. Not quite. Up to this point, I have made 19 iterations. That's 19 printed versions and each one with its own tweaks. Let me highlight some of the things that I learned. There seem to be a few main areas of the shoe to isolate, and some of them are actual shoe anatomy. The toe box, ball of the foot, arch, vamp, counter, and heel. To fix the toe box, I realized, especially when it's pointed, it's better to shift it towards the big toe. That's the point where it's usually the longest anyways. Then when I need to remove or add space, I just move a soft selection along the Z-axis. Sometimes I need to scale that spot a little bit too, and a soft selection helps for that. To fix the ball of the foot and the arch, I needed to get a lot more information. I scanned the foot with a sock on, and that seemed to scan a lot better. And then I made a salt dough to take impressions. So between the scan and the dough, I had a lot more information to get more accurate measurements and the shape of the foot. It's really important to make the ball of the foot perfectly fitted, especially since it takes so much of the pressure in the shoe. The vamp is the section above your toes. I like to tweak the vamp, counter, and sides of the shoes by creating a low-res mesh and wrapping the high-res mesh to it. This gives far more control and reduces the likelihood of creating wobbly lines. Then I just apply the same technique I used to bring in detail in the inner foot mesh. The sides of the shoe were commonly a problem because it's not a super flexible material, so it's really important that they don't have artifacts and they don't dig into the skin. Finally, the heel. It wasn't until Jenna really tested out the shoes until we found out the heel has a really high point of tension where it meets the base of the foot. This makes it super easy to break in the right position, and Jenna has a tendency to rock onto her heels. I even tested printing out one heel horizontally and one vertically, and although I thought the horizontal one would actually be stronger because of the layer lines, the vertical one was actually a lot stronger. After a lot of research, it seems like there might be some sort of solution by creating a harder material in the core of the heel, maybe a metal stake or something like that. My temporary solution was to create a sort of fillet so that the heel has more of a fall off rather than a very abrupt choke point. Another problem was that I was alternating printing the left and right shoes so that she could compare between the two. But this actually came back to bite me because one foot can be larger than the other. That's definitely something to account for. 19 versions later, I finally completed the goal of creating comfortable, custom-fitted, wearable 3D printed shoes. I had to get Jenna to try out the heels in a more realistic setting, and what better way to test out a pair of high heels than to take a trip to the mall. She wore them around for a couple of hours and they seemed to work just great. The only complaints is obviously the need for more style in the outer design and a couple of tweaks to the counter. However, our goal for this phase was just to create something that's comfortable. I wanted to do this project in a way that was at least somewhat doable for most people. You easily have access to a lot of phone scanner apps. I didn't even take advantage of LiDAR. The Salto I used was easily made in about 30 minutes. There are many 3D printers and slicers that can give you the same results. I used the Prusa Mark III and Prusa Slicer. I used Maya for most of my modeling, but you could also use Blender as a great alternative. I've received requests for different styles that I should make, like Cinderella heels or the Impossible Tower in Abu Dhabi. I will definitely need to revisit making these heels more stylish, improving the structure of the heel and grip in a future episode. So stay tuned. If you found this information helpful, please give it a like. If you want to be the first to see my videos, click the notification bell. If there's anything I missed or questions you have for me, feel free to drop a line in the comments. It's always great to hear from you. I try to post regularly on TikTok and Instagram as well. That's all for now. Until next time.